"You're just not cut out for this job," Karen said, leaning back in her leather chair, a trace of satisfaction in her eyes. "The West Ridge Hotel project needs someone with stronger leadership skills." I kept my face neutral, even as her words hit with familiar sting. Through the glass walls of her office, I could see co-workers glancing in our direction, some pretending not to eavesdrop. "You mean the same West Ridge Hotel project where my redesign saved us 300 grand? I asked, my voice low and steady. Karen waved a hand dismissively. "My redesign, I presented it to the board. After I created it." "That's your job, Marcus, to support me," she sighed dramatically, like she was the one being wronged. "Look, this just isn't working anymore. I need someone who understands their place in the hierarchy." I nodded slowly, feeling a strange calm settle in. "I understand perfectly. I'll be gone by Friday, but Monday will be interesting." She rolled her eyes. Always with the cryptic remarks. "This is exactly what I mean. I'm Marcus Vasquez, 49 years old, Senior Project Coordinator at Reynolds Architecture and Design. For 8 years, I've poured everything into this firm developing bold, budget-smart design solutions for our most complex client needs. I care about architecture that balances form and function, but more than that, I care about the integrity of the process. What stands in the way?" Karen Mitchell, 41. My direct supervisor, the youngest partner in the firm's history, and a master of rebranding other people's ideas as her own, especially mine. Her meteoric rise wasn't built on brilliance. It was built on theft of credit, of trust, and of work. And now she wants me out. Maybe I've grown too vocal about credit. Maybe she's realized others are starting to connect the dots. Whatever the reason, she's made her move. As I walked back to my desk, I passed the wall of project photos framed images of the West Ridge Hotel, the Pinehurst Community Center, the Lakeview Towers. Projects I lived and breathed for months, all bearing plaques with Karen's name as lead designer. My phone buzzed, a message from David, one of our senior architects. Karen looked smug. "As expected," I said into the phone, "she's pushing me out." "That's ridiculous," David replied. "Your coastal restoration project just won an award." "Her coastal restoration project at least, that's what the press release said." I sat down at my desk, unlocked the drawer and pulled out my external hard drive. It held everything: original design drafts, email threads, memos, and meeting notes. I'd started collecting it all months ago when Karen's behavior shifted from quietly taking credit to actively erasing me from the picture. My desk phone rang. The receptionist. "Marcus, someone from Archer Hayes is in the lobby. Says it's about a consultation you did for them." I froze. Archer Hayes was our biggest competitor, and I'd never done a single piece of work for them. "I'll be right down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Riding the elevator, a sinking feeling gripped my gut. This was no longer just about Karen stealing credit. Something else was unfolding, something worse. I've spent 27 years in architecture and design. I started as a junior drafter in New York, slowly building a career while raising my daughter on my own. I moved from small residential projects to multi-million-dollar commercial builds and eventually into my specialty: sustainable, community-driven spaces. 8 years ago, Reynolds Architecture and Design recruited me from a boutique firm in Philadelphia. They offered a creative leadership role, freedom to innovate, and resources to push boundaries in eco-conscious design. For the first 4 years, under our then creative director, I thrived. My coastal restoration initiative, a series of flood-resilient public spaces made from reclaimed materials, became our signature project. Clients loved it. So did the media. Then came Karen. Initially hired as a project manager, she quickly latched onto our aging founder, Harold Reynolds. She was charming, strategic, lavish praise, casual weekend invitations to her Catskills retreat, just the right amount of flattery. Within 18 months, she was a partner, the youngest in the firm's history. At first, I respected her ambition. She gave polished presentations, handled clients well, and seemed sincerely curious about my design process. She'd often drop by my desk to talk through ideas. I thought maybe she saw me as a mentor, maybe even a friend. But the warning signs came, little by little. First, in joint presentations, my name began to disappear. Then the projects I'd conceptualized were reassigned with Karen suddenly at the helm. She'd interrupt me in meetings, then reword my ideas as if they'd just occurred to her. Marcus had an interesting starting point, she'd say, but I refined it into something workable. Harold, half-retired and barely present, didn't push back. The other partners, mostly old-guard men in their 60s, seemed impressed by Karen's polish and confidence. She knew how to stand out just enough while still being palatable to their world. My colleagues had started noticing the pattern. David, one of the senior architects, once whispered, "Did she seriously just pitch your riverfront concept as her big breakthrough?" Our receptionist, Jenna, began timestamping my original design drafts before filing them subtle signs of quiet solidarity. I kept pushing through, convincing myself that eventually my work would speak for itself. When the Regional Design Excellence Award was handed out for the coastal project, I expected at least a mention. Instead, Karen stood on stage alone, basking in the spotlight, delivering a speech that left me invisible. That night, I started backing everything up. Emails, drafts, time-stamped design iterations, documenting the creative trail. Not to pick a fight, part of me still wanted to believe it would all sort itself out, but for peace of mind. Looking back, I was naive. Karen wasn't just opportunistic, she was strategic. Each borrowed idea, each hijacked concept, was a calculated move up the ladder. And I, unknowingly, had become both her biggest asset and her most inconvenient threat. We'd settled into an uneasy rhythm, her taking credit, me producing the work, increasingly bitter but conflict-averse until yesterday. That's when she asked me for my full project portfolio for archival purposes. The look on her face, entitled, measured, quietly smug, finally set off alarm bells. Down in the lobby, a sharply dressed man in his 50s approached and extended his hand. "Mr. Adams." "James Donovan, from Archer and Hayes. Thanks for taking the time." "There must be a misunderstanding," I said cautiously. "I've never consulted for your firm." He frowned slightly. "That's strange. We have preliminary renderings for the Portland waterfront project credited to you. Karen Mitchell forwarded them last month. She said you had provided consultation." My stomach sank. The Portland waterfront, $50 million in funding, a massive revitalization effort for the harbor district. I'd drawn up sketches for it months ago, purely personal, just rough ideas after hours to keep my creative brain engaged. I never submitted them, never even discussed them in the office. "May I see those renderings?" I asked, keeping my voice level. He handed me a tablet. There they were, my drawings, slightly modified, but unmistakably mine. Elevated green spaces, modular public areas adapted for seasonal flooding, pedestrian bridges that honored historic structures while adding modern utility. These were presented as a joint collaboration between our firms, James explained. We were impressed. Some elements are already being integrated into our proposal. The floor beneath me might as well have shifted. Karen hadn't just stolen my work, she had sold it. To our largest competitor. I steadied myself and asked, "Who else has seen these designs?" "I asked," James continued. "Our entire executive team has seen the designs, and we already presented them to the Portland Development Commission. They were quite enthusiastic." He paused, reading my expression. "Is there a problem?" "I just need to check something with my office," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Excuse me for a moment." In the restroom, I leaned against the cool tile wall, trying to process what had just happened. Karen had stolen my personal design sketches, likely accessed them from my computer during one of the countless times I'd stepped away, and sold them as a joint collaboration with our fiercest competitor. The ethical breach was staggering, but more than that, it explained everything, why she'd become so determined to push me out. If those designs were already in motion with the Portland Commission, she couldn't afford for me to find out. She needed me gone before anyone realized the truth. My phone buzzed. A company-wide calendar alert, all-staff meeting, 3 p.m., special announcement. When I returned to my desk, the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations were quieter, more pointed. People glanced my way, then quickly looked away. David stopped by, speaking in a hushed tone. "Harold's flying in for the meeting, supposed to be something big." "Let me guess," I said. "A partnership with Archer and Hayes?" His eyebrows shot up. How do you know that? James Donovan's downstairs right now, I said, holding the Portland waterfront designs. Wait, your designs? David blinked. Karen's been spearheading Portland for months. It's the reason she's getting promoted to creative director. And there it was, the final piece. Karen wasn't just forcing me out, she was ascending into a position created around work she had stolen from me. I opened my email. There it was, a message from HR. Subject line, transition package, final details. They weren't even waiting until Friday. She had moved my exit up to today. My hand moved instinctively toward my drawer. Inside was the external hard drive copies of everything. My original CAD files, metadata timestamps, early drafts, side-by-side comparisons, the full documentation trail. Enough proof to expose Karen's pattern of theft and deceit. But would anyone actually believe me? Karen had spent years grooming the leadership team, weekly lunches with Harold, shared client trips, her calculated charm. Meanwhile, she'd slowly painted me as resentful, difficult, stuck in the past. To most of them, this would look like sour grapes. I hesitated, then quietly closed the drawer. Not yet. I needed to think, to move carefully. This was no longer about recognition. It was about ethics, possibly criminal liability, and my entire future. By 3 p.m., the conference room was full. People stood along the walls. I slid into a seat in the back corner, ignoring the murmurs and quick glances. Karen stood at the front of the room beside Harold Reynolds. Her expression gleamed with quiet triumph. She wore the same navy blazer she always saved for big announcements, tailored, sharp, and smug. I folded my arms and leaned back. This was far from over. Harold cleared his throat. Today marks an exciting new chapter for Reynolds Architecture and Design. We're announcing a strategic partnership with Archer and Hayes for the Portland waterfront revitalization. On the screen behind him appeared the very same visuals James Donovan had shown me earlier, now branded with both firms' logos. This collaboration, spearheaded by Karen Mitchell, represents the kind of innovative thinking that drives our firm forward. Harold continued, Karen's vision for Portland has already impressed city officials and secured preliminary approval. Karen stepped forward, glowing. Thank you, Harold. This project exemplifies our commitment to sustainable urban renewal. She clicked through my designs concepts I had developed during countless late nights, as if they were born from her own imagination. With each slide, the knot in my chest tightened. To lead this exciting new direction, Harold announced, I'm pleased to name Karen our new creative director, effective immediately. Applause erupted. Karen accepted the promotion with graceful modesty, thanking Harold for his mentorship. For a moment, her eyes met mine. There was a flicker there, something between challenge and warning. As the crowd began to disperse, I moved quickly toward Harold. Could I speak with you privately about the Portland project? Of course, Matthew, he said. Let's use my office. A small spark of hope flared. Harold had always seemed fair, if somewhat detached. If I could show him the evidence, maybe he'd actually listen. But Karen intercepted us in the hallway. Harold, we really should go over the transition plan for my new role, and wasn't your board call at 3:30? Right, yes. He checked his watch. Matthew, can this wait until tomorrow? It's about the origin of the Portland designs, I said, voice firm. Karen's smile faltered. Actually, Harold, that reminds me, there have been some performance concerns about Matthew I've been meaning to raise. Harold's brows knit slightly. Oh? Resource allocation, missed deadlines, some confusion about project authorship. It was subtle but unmistakable. She was painting me as the one with ethical issues. Let's address this now, Harold decided, motioning us into his office. What followed was 20 excruciating minutes of character assassination. Karen spoke with professional poise as she unraveled my credibility. She presented edited timelines to make it look like I'd taken undue credit for joint efforts. She cited performance concerns that had never shown up in any of my evaluations. And worst of all, she claimed I had accessed her computer and stolen her concepts for Portland. That's completely false, I interrupted. I have proof. Matthew, Harold said, cutting me off, this isn't productive. Karen has documented her concerns thoroughly. Given these issues and with the restructuring around our new partnership, we believe it's best to accelerate your departure. You're firing me today without investigating anything, she said. Karen calmly opened a folder and slid it across the desk. Here's your separation agreement. Standard terms, 2 months severance. We'll need your desk cleared out by end of day. I stared at the document, a storm of disbelief and fury rising in me. And if I dispute this? Harold's face hardened. We have documentation of performance issues going back several months. Challenging this would only damage your professional reputation. We both knew what that meant. Karen had been laying the groundwork for this, manipulating reports, rewriting timelines, twisting perception. And now she'd framed me as the liability. And Harold had bought it. Even with the evidence I had, a legal battle would be messy, public, draining, and potentially career-ending. I understand, I said quietly, accepting the folder. Karen gave me a smile laced with fake sympathy. I'll help communicate this transition to the team. As I stepped out of Harold's office, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. Subject: Portland Waterfront Project, confidential. The sender wasn't someone I recognized. I opened it cautiously. Attached were internal documents, detailed rollout phases for the Portland project, timelines, budget breakdowns, stakeholder lists. At the top, a short message. You should see this. Don't let them get away with what they're doing to you. A friend. For a second, I considered forwarding it to Harold, proof that others knew the truth. But then it hit me. This wasn't help. It was a trap. If I circulated confidential project information, especially after being terminated, Karen could claim corporate espionage. The optics would be devastating. She'd win the narrative. I returned to my desk and began clearing it, methodically, under the watchful eye of an HR rep. The external hard drive with my full archive was the first thing I packed. Family photos, 2 design awards, and a small succulent my daughter had given me followed. 8 years, reduced to 1 cardboard box. At reception, Jenna stood and walked over. She hugged me, whispering, "I'm so sorry it ended like this. We all know what really happened." "Thanks," I murmured, genuinely touched. "Take care of yourself." Outside, I hailed a cab and gave the driver my address. Only once I slumped into the back seat did I let the weight of it all sink in. My career at Reynolds was over. My name, my reputation possibly tarnished. 8 years of work, vision, and long nights. Now bearing someone else's name. My phone buzzed with incoming texts from co-workers. I turned it face down. I couldn't handle sympathy or outrage, not yet. The separation agreement was in my bag, heavy as a brick. Its terms were both generous and insulting. 2 months' pay in exchange for silence and a signature admitting I had underperformed. At home, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. First, I uploaded every file from the hard drive to a secure cloud backup. Then I started researching employment law, intellectual property rights, whistleblower protections. I jotted down notes, bookmarked legal firms. If I was going to fight, I needed to do it smart. A knock on the door interrupted me. I checked the peephole. It was David. "I came to check on you," he said when I opened up. "Things escalated fast today." "Yeah," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." I poured him a glass of wine, grateful for the company. "Karen had it all mapped out," I said. "My termination, the partnership, her promotion. It was a setup from the beginning." David gave me a look. "It's worse than you think," he said quietly, accepting the glass. "After you left," David said, "Karen told everyone you'd been stealing her designs for months. She implied you were leaking confidential material to competitors." I nearly dropped my glass. She's accusing me of exactly what she did. She showed emails, man, messages that looked like they came from your account sending concept drafts to outside firms. I froze. "That's impossible. I never sent—" I paused, something horrible clicking into place. "When were these emails supposedly sent?" David furrowed his brow. "Last month, mostly. She had specific dates." I felt the floor shift under me. I was on vacation in Vancouver then. She had access to my computer. "She could have used your email," David said, nodding. "It makes sense." But the way she framed it. She was convincing. Even people who like you are starting to question things. A wave of nausea hit me. This wasn't just about Karen stealing my designs or getting me fired. She was trying to poison my reputation, ensuring no one would believe my side of the story if I ever came forward. There's more, David added hesitantly. I heard a rumor Archer and Hayes might be considering you as a consultant after your non-compete expires. What? Why would they? Then it clicked. I sat back, stunned. That's her insurance policy. She's setting it up to make it look like I was feeding them designs all along. Exactly, David said quietly. If you ever try to take legal action, she'll spin the narrative you were selling concepts behind Reynolds' back. Makes you look like the bad guy. After David left, I just sat there, numb. Karen hadn't just outmaneuvered me, she'd outflanked me. She had planned this like a chess match, anticipating my every move, planting evidence, controlling the narrative before I even realized there was one. My phone rang, unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mr. Vasquez, James Donovan from Archer and Hayes. I wanted to follow up on our earlier conversation. Mr. Donovan, I can't discuss anything related to Reynolds or the Portland project. I'm no longer with the firm. Actually, he said, that's exactly why I'm calling. Our leadership team was very impressed with the designs Karen credited to you. We'd like to explore a potential position. There it was, the confirmation of David's warning, the job offer that would make it look like I'd been selling insider work all along. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully, but I need some time to consider my next steps. Can I get back to you next week? Of course, he replied. I hung up and turned immediately to my laptop. I dove into my archived emails, scanning through 6 years of correspondence with Karen. Somewhere in those files, there had to be something, some piece of truth she hadn't scrubbed clean. And then I found it. Buried in a folder from 3 years ago, a forgotten thread. Karen had asked for input on a coastal restoration proposal. In it, she'd written, "Need your magic touch on this one. The kind of innovative approach that made your coastal project such a success." There it was. Proof. Not only of my authorship, but in her own words. Long before any promotions or politics, she'd acknowledged my work. With renewed focus, I spent the weekend building my case. That email was just the start. I assembled a full dossier. Original design files with metadata timestamps. Emails showing the evolution of my concepts. Performance reviews that contradicted every claim about my underperformance. Client testimonials confirming they'd worked directly with me. By Sunday night, I had a timeline that clearly outlined how Karen had appropriated my work step by step. Monday morning, I was ready to act. Step 1, submit a formal complaint to the Reynolds Board of Directors, backed by my evidence. Step 2, consult an attorney about intellectual property violations and wrongful termination. As I reviewed everything one last time, an email notification appeared. From Harold Reynolds. Subject concerning developments, Portland project. Full position, clear my record, and Karen stays off any project that involves my designs. Harold winced. That's not possible. Karen's already been announced as creative director. I didn't flinch. Then I'll take my evidence to the Portland City Council and to Architectural Digest. Let them hear it from me. He sat back, clearly pained. You damaged the entire firm just to take her down. I'd ensure my work is credited properly, I said firmly. If Reynolds takes a hit, that's on Karen, not me. Just then, my phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. I turned it toward Harold so he could read it himself. Archer and Hayes withdraw from Portland Waterfront Partnership. His face drained of color. It's already unraveling, I said. You still have a window to control the story, but it's closing fast. He stared down into his coffee cup, calculating. What exactly do you want, Michael? I laid it out clearly. Public acknowledgement of my authorship, Karen removed from anything tied to my work. I want to present my Portland designs directly to the city officials and regarding my termination. I paused. I haven't decided whether to challenge it legally, but I'm not signing the separation agreement. Harold gave a slow nod. I'll need to speak with the board, but with Portland pulling out, we'll need to respond quickly. He stood, shook my hand, and left. Not 5 minutes later, I got 2 emails. One from James Donovan at Archer and Hayes. Portland officials requesting clarification on authorship. We'd value your direct input. The second came from a city planner in Portland, reaching out regarding sustainable design elements, hoping to clarify source and concept origin. The situation was officially out of Karen's control now, and Harold's too. The very people she tried to impress were turning to me for answers. For the first time since I walked out of that office with a cardboard box, I allowed myself a real smile. Karen had built her career taking credit for work she didn't understand. Now, faced with scrutiny, that house of cards was collapsing because she couldn't explain what she never created. Tuesday morning, I dressed with purpose. Charcoal suit, blue shirt, no tie. Crisp, sharp. Assertive, but not showy. The external hard drive went in my bag, along with printed versions of my timelines, metadata screenshots, and testimonial letters. I was walking into this armed with truth. The conference room fell silent when I entered. Harold sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 board members. On one side sat the Portland officials and the team from Archer and Hayes. On the other, alone, sat Karen Mitchell. She looked alert but stiff, like someone trying not to sweat. Harold opened the meeting. "Thank you all for coming. We're here today to clarify questions about the authorship of the Portland waterfront design." Karen jumped in before he could say more. "I'd like to begin by expressing how disappointed I am that confusion has arisen about my work," she said smoothly. While Michael contributed some early feedback, the concepts were entirely... Actually, I cut in, walking to the projector and plugging in my laptop. "I'd like to share a few documents of my own." "I think it's better if I show you," I said, plugging in my laptop. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through it slow, methodical, irrefutable. I started with the original design files, timestamps clearly dated months before Karen had ever touched the project. Then came the process documentation, sketches, annotated drafts, development iterations. Finally, I projected the email thread Karen had likely forgotten about, the one where she praised my earlier coastal project and asked for that same magic on her new assignment. I ended with a single slide, a side-by-side comparison of the Portland proposal and the original coastal restoration concept. The overlap was undeniable. "These designs," I said evenly, "are my work. They were developed independently and stored under my credentials. Karen adapted them without consent, credit, or clearance and presented them as her own. And worse, she positioned herself for a promotion off of them while pushing me out." The room was silent for a beat. Then one of the Portland officials leaned forward. "These are precisely the technical details we've been requesting," he said, his tone sharp as he turned to Karen. "Details you weren't able to explain." Karen's expression tightened. "This is ridiculous. He's manipulating metadata to sabotage me. He's bitter and jealous of my promotion." "Actually," said the rep from Archer and Hayes, adjusting his glasses, "our tech team has already reviewed the files. The metadata is clean. These are unquestionably the originals." Harold cleared his throat. "Our own IT department confirmed unauthorized access to Michael's workstation while he was on vacation. Someone logged into his account and transferred documents externally. We have the logs." Karen froze. The blood drained from her face. "Harold, you can't seriously..." Karen," he cut her off, his tone iron. "I think it's time you stepped out." Her chair scraped against the floor as she stood. No one said a word. 2 HR staff members waited by the door. Karen glanced at me once, but there was no fire left in her eyes, only disbelief. She left without another word. What followed moved quickly. The board convened that same afternoon. Harold, scrambling to restore the firm's reputation, publicly announced my reinstatement along with a promotion to creative director. The Portland delegation was direct. They wanted me to personally lead the waterfront project going forward. The most satisfying moment came the next morning, when a company-wide email from Harold hit every inbox. In it, he formally acknowledged my authorship of Reynolds' award-winning designs, specifically stating that the concepts previously attributed to Karen were, in fact, mine. When we met privately later that week, Harold didn't try to spin it. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "I should have listened when you tried to tell me what was happening." "Yes," I said plainly. "You should have. 8 years of my work was handed to someone else while you looked the other way." He nodded, chastened. He knew there was no excuse. 1 month later, I stood before the Portland Development Commission, presenting my refined vision for the waterfront revitalization. The project was back on track, now a collaboration between Reynolds and Archer and Hayes, with me at the helm, and this time every contributor received proper credit. Karen. She had become a cautionary tale. After 3 other designers came forward with similar claims about stolen concepts, her professional reputation crumbled. Last I heard, she had left the industry entirely. As for me, my career entered a new chapter. The spotlight I once avoided now felt earned. I established clear internal policies at Reynolds around design attribution and began mentoring junior staff, helping ensure no one else would be silenced the way I had been. Was it worth it? My daughter asked one night over dinner, celebrating the launch of my first major project as creative director. All those years of someone else getting credit? I thought about Karen's words that day in Harold's office, the smirk, the dismissal. You're just not cut out for this job. I smiled. No, I said, but the vindication, that was worth every minute.